The night the rebels attacked Ogidi village, Mama Nkechi was running with her 3-year-old twin daughters pressed against her chest when the explosion separated them forever. One moment she had both Adanna and Chioma clutching her wrapper, and the next moment only Adanna's small fingers remained in her grip. The smoke was so thick, so suffocating, that Mama Nkechi stumbled backward, coughing violently as gunfire crackled through the air like fireworks from hell itself. She screamed Chioma's name until her throat was raw, searching desperately through the chaos of burning huts and fleeing villagers, but her daughter had vanished into the darkness. When Papa Nkechi found his wife at dawn, collapsed near the river with Adanna sleeping exhausted in her arms, the look in her eyes told him everything. They searched for 3 days, checking every refugee camp, every neighboring village, showing Chioma's photograph to anyone who would listen, but it was as if the earth had swallowed their daughter whole. Miles away in the small farming village of Umunze, a childless couple named Obi and Ngozi were walking home from the relief camp where they had volunteered to help war victims. That was when they heard it, a tiny whimpering sound coming from behind a cluster of palm trees near the roadside. Ngozi grabbed her husband's arm and they hurried toward the sound, finding a small girl curled up in the dirt, her yellow dress torn and covered in mud, her face streaked with tears and ash. The child was trembling, eyes wide with terror, unable to speak beyond frightened sobs. Ngozi lifted her gently, cradling her close, and the little girl buried her face in her neck, finally feeling safe. They took her to the police post, filed reports, waited weeks for someone to claim her, but nobody came. The war had displaced thousands, orphaned hundreds, and one more lost child seemed like a tragedy too small for anyone to notice. After 6 months of fostering her, filling out paperwork, and praying for guidance, Obi and Ngozi made it official. The little girl they now called Chioma was theirs, a miracle child sent to heal their empty arms, and they promised God they would love her as their own flesh and blood. Chioma grew up in a modest mud house with a rusty zinc roof that leaked during heavy rains, but she never knew she was missing anything because Mama Ngozi's love filled every crack and corner of their simple life. They were farmers who worked sunrise to sunset in their small yam and cassava fields, their hands permanently stained with earth, their backs bent from years of honest labor. Chioma would wake up at dawn to help her mother fetch water from the stream, her small shoulders carrying jerry cans that seemed too heavy for her frame, but she never complained. After school, while other children played, she would help Papa Obi in the farm, learning to plant, to weed, to harvest with the same dedication she brought to her studies. Her teachers often marveled at her intelligence and her hunger to learn, saying she had a brightness about her that reminded them of children from wealthy homes who had everything but appreciated nothing. But Chioma appreciated everything because she had been taught that poverty was not a curse, but a teacher, and hard work was the only inheritance worth passing down. Meanwhile, in the city of Enugu, Adanna was growing up in a sprawling mansion with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and more bedrooms than a family of 3 needed. Papa Nkechi had built a successful importing business that had made them wealthy beyond measure, but no amount of money could fill the hole that Chioma's absence had carved into their hearts. They spoiled Adanna terribly, giving her everything she pointed at, afraid that if they denied her anything, they might lose her too. Adanna had learned early that tears brought gifts, that tantrums brought apologies, that the world would bend to accommodate her feelings if she cried loud enough. She was beautiful, with the same face as her lost sister. But while Chioma's beauty was warmed by humility and hardship, Adanna's beauty had turned cold with entitlement. She had closets full of clothes she wore once, drawers full of jewelry she never touched, and a heart that had never learned the simple joy of earning something through effort. Her parents loved her desperately, but in trying to protect her from pain, they had accidentally raised a daughter who could not see anyone's pain but her own. When Mama Ngozi died of malaria during the rainy season, Chioma was 19 years old and felt like an orphan all over again. She washed her mother's body herself, dressed her in her best Sunday wrapper, and sang the hymns Mama loved while neighbors gathered to mourn the woman who had never had much but had always shared what little she possessed. 6 months later, Papa Obi followed his wife, his heart simply giving up without his beloved Ngozi to wake up beside. Chioma buried him next to her mother, under the mango tree they had planted together, and afterward she sat alone in the quiet house, surrounded by their few possessions, wondering what she would do next. That was when she found the metal box hidden beneath their bed, wrapped in old newspapers and tied with twine. Inside was a letter written in Mama Ngozi's shaky handwriting, along with a faded photograph and some official-looking documents that Chioma had never seen before. Her hands trembled as she read the letter. "My dearest Chioma, if you are reading this, then God has called us home, and you are alone. We have loved you as our own, and you have been the greatest blessing of our lives, but there is something you must know. You were not born to us, my daughter. We found you during the war, lost and frightened, and we took you in when nobody came to claim you. But we kept the newspaper clippings, kept the reports, kept the photograph of your parents from when they were searching. Your real name is Chioma Nkechi, and your family lives in Enugu. There are wealthy people who never stopped looking for you, and though it breaks my heart to lose you even in death, you deserve to know where you come from." It took Chioma 8 months of searching, working as a house help during the day, to save money for transport and spending her evenings in internet cafes trying to trace the names from the old newspaper clippings. She traveled to Enugu 3 times, each time with an address that turned out to be old or wrong, each time returning to Umunze with less money and more determination. People thought she was foolish, chasing ghosts and dreams, when she should be focusing on making a life for herself. But something in her bones told her this was right, that she would not find peace until she found the truth. On her 4th trip, she finally stood before the massive gates of a house that looked like something from a movie, all white walls and manicured gardens and luxury cars parked in the driveway. Her hands were shaking when she pressed the intercom button, her throat dry when she explained to the security guard why she was there. She waited for 2 hours before they finally let her in. Before Papa and Mama Nkechi came out to the sitting room where she stood in her faded dress and worn slippers, feeling small and out of place among their expensive furniture. Mama Nkechi took one look at her and fell to her knees, a wail tearing from her throat that sounded like 20 years of grief finally finding its voice. "Chioma, my Chioma! Oh God, you brought her back to me." She crawled across the marble floor to where Chioma stood frozen, wrapped her arms around her daughter's legs, and sobbed in a way that made every servant in the house stop what they were doing to witness a mother's heart breaking and healing at the same time. Papa Nkechi was crying too, his shoulders shaking as he pulled them both into his arms, whispering, "Thank you, Jesus, thank you," over and over like a prayer. They held her for so long that Chioma's legs went numb, but she didn't care because for the first time in her life, she felt the embrace of her biological parents. That was when Adana came home from her shopping trip with friends, loaded with bags from expensive boutiques, and froze in the doorway at the sight of her parents, crying over a stranger who somehow looked exactly like her own reflection. Adana's first thought was not joy but fear. Not gratitude but anger, and she hated herself for it even as the feelings consumed her. Her parents explained everything in a rush of words and tears. They were glowing with happiness, planning celebrations, already calling relatives to share the miracle. But all Adana could think was that her life as an only child, as the center of their universe, was over. She forced a smile, hugged Chioma stiffly when her mother insisted, but inside she was calculating what this meant for her inheritance, her position, her power in this family. Chioma seemed nice enough, almost too nice, with her humble clothes and grateful tears, and the way she apologized for everything like she didn't deserve to take up space. But Adana didn't want nice. She wanted her twin sister to stay lost, to remain a sad memory instead of becoming a living rival for her parents' love. Over the following weeks, Mama and Papa Nkechi showered Chioma with everything they had denied themselves the right to give her for 20 years. They bought her new clothes, new shoes, enrolled her in university, gave her a bedroom as big as the entire house she had grown up in. They threw a massive party to introduce her to extended family and high society, inviting everyone who mattered to witness their miracle. Chioma was overwhelmed by it all, uncomfortable with the attention, but she tried her best to adapt because she could see how much it meant to her parents. She studied Adanna, trying to connect with her twin, looking for the bond that people said twins shared, but Adanna was cold and distant in ways that confused her. During the party, when guests weren't looking, Adanna would make small cutting remarks about Chioma's manners, her grammar, the way she held her fork, turning every interaction into a subtle humiliation. "You'll learn eventually," Adanna would say with a fake smile. "It's not your fault you were raised by villagers." Chioma would swallow the hurt and smile back, telling herself that Adanna just needed time to adjust, that sisterhood would come with patience, that love could not be forced but had to be grown like the yams Papa Obi had taught her to cultivate. 3 months after Chioma's return, the household had settled into a new rhythm, but it was not the rhythm of equality that Mama and Papa Nkechi imagined. Adanna had become a master at manipulation, playing the perfect daughter in front of their parents while systematically turning Chioma into an unpaid servant when they were absent. It started small, asking Chioma to bring her water from the kitchen, then asking her to iron a dress, then insisting she wash her clothes because you know how to do it better. You grew up doing it. Chioma did it all without complaint, because she was used to work, because she wanted Adanna to like her, because she believed that service was a form of love. But the maids noticed, and they whispered among themselves about how the new daughter, who should be treated like royalty, was instead being treated like the help. Adanna would snap her fingers at Chioma in front of guests, asking her to fetch things, to serve drinks, to clear plates, and Chioma would do it with a smile that broke the heart of anyone paying attention. One evening, Mama Nkechi came home early from a church meeting and found Chioma on her knees, scrubbing Adanna's bathroom floor, while Adanna sat on her bed, painting her nails and chatting on the phone with friends. The sight stopped Mama Nkechi cold. "Chioma, what are you doing? We have maids for this." But before Chioma could answer, Adanna jumped in smoothly. "Oh, Mama," she insisted. She said she wanted to help. "You know how she is, always working. I told her to rest, but she wouldn't listen." Chioma looked at her sister, saw the challenge in her eyes, and made a decision not to cause trouble. "Yes, Mama. I just wanted to help. I'm not used to sitting idle." Mama Nkechi frowned, but accepted the explanation, though something in her spirit was troubled. After she left, Adanna stood up, walked over to where Chioma was still kneeling, and bent down to whisper in her ear, "You're smart to keep your mouth shut. Because if you tell them what I'm really like, I'll make sure they think you're the ungrateful one trying to turn them against their real daughter. They've known me for 20 years. They've known you for 3 months. Who do you think they'll believe?" Chioma felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to let them fall, refused to give Adanna the satisfaction of seeing her break. The day Prince Chidi of the neighboring royal family visited their home for a business meeting with Papa Nkechi, Adanna made sure she looked absolutely perfect. She wore her most expensive dress, had her makeup done professionally, practiced her most charming laugh, because landing a prince would secure her position as the most important daughter forever. She positioned herself strategically in the sitting room where she knew he would pass, ready to accidentally bump into him, but Prince Chidi barely glanced at her. What he did notice was Chioma in the garden, kneeling in the dirt helping the gardener plant new flowers, her old clothes covered in soil, her face free of makeup and shining with genuine joy as she worked. She was humming an old folk song that Mama Ngozi used to sing, completely unaware that she was being watched, and there was something about her natural grace and unself-conscious beauty that made Prince Chidi forget why he had come. He walked out to the garden, introduced himself, and was charmed by how flustered Chioma became. How she apologized for her dirty hands and simple appearance. How she had no idea who he was beyond one of Papa's business associates. They talked for 30 minutes about flowers, about farming, about the difference between city life and village life, and Prince Chidi found himself laughing more genuinely than he had in months. When he asked for her number, Chioma hesitated, looking down at her soil-stained fingers like she couldn't imagine why a man like him would want to call a woman like her. "Please," he said softly, "I would very much like to take you to dinner, if you'll let me." She gave him her number with shaking hands, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. From the sitting room window, Adana watched the entire exchange, her manicured nails digging into her palms until they drew blood. This was impossible. This was not how the story was supposed to go. The prince was supposed to choose her, the polished one, the sophisticated one, not her village sister who didn't even know how to dress properly. Prince Chidi called Chioma that same evening and every evening after for 2 weeks, their conversations lasting for hours. When he finally asked her on a proper date to the city's most exclusive restaurant, Chioma was terrified and excited in equal measure. She had never been to a fancy restaurant, had no idea what to wear or how to act, but she wanted to try because Prince Chidi made her feel seen in ways she had never experienced before. She spent her small savings on a beautiful traditional attire, a gorgeous wrapper and blouse set in deep purple with gold threading, and practiced walking in the low heels she had bought second-hand from the market. Adana watched her sister's preparations with growing rage, a plan forming in her mind that was as cruel as it was calculated. The evening before the date, Adana approached Chioma with a smile so sweet it should have been a warning. "Sister, I want to apologize for how I've treated you. I've been jealous and unkind, and I want to make amends. Please, let me prepare a special drink for us, a traditional recipe Mama taught me, so we can bond properly as sisters should." Chioma was so hungry for Adana's acceptance that she ignored the small voice in her head that whispered caution. She drank the fruity mixture Adana prepared, grateful for what she thought was finally a breakthrough in their relationship. Within 20 minutes, she was dizzy, her words slurring, her body growing impossibly heavy. "I don't feel well," she mumbled, trying to stand, but Adana was already guiding her to bed, her smile never wavering. "Just rest, sister. You'll feel better soon." Chioma's eyes closed, and she fell into a sleep so deep it felt like drowning. When she woke up hours later, her head pounding and her mouth dry, she stumbled to the bathroom mirror and screamed. Her beautiful long hair, the hair she had been growing since childhood, was gone. Someone had shaved her completely bald while she slept, and that someone was standing in the doorway, watching her horror with satisfaction. "Oops," Adana said, examining her own perfectly manicured nails. "I guess your date tomorrow will see the real you now. Let's see if your precious prince loves you without your crown." Chioma locked herself in the bathroom and cried until she had no tears left, staring at her bald head in the mirror, feeling violated and humiliated in ways she couldn't put into words. She thought about calling Prince Chidi to cancel, about hiding in her room until her hair grew back, about running away from this house and this sister who hated her so much. But then she remembered Mama Ngozi, remembered the day Papa Obi had told her that true beauty was not in the face but in the spirit, that anyone could wear expensive clothes, but not everyone could wear dignity with grace. She thought about all the hardships she had survived, all the losses she had endured, and she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. If Prince Chidi loved her, he would love all of her, including this bald head that represented both her vulnerability and her victory over shame. She would go on that date with her head held high, not despite her baldness, but because of it, showing him and herself, and especially Adana, that true confidence could not be stolen with scissors. The next evening, Chioma walked into that expensive restaurant, wearing her purple traditional attire, her bald head gleaming under the chandeliers, her makeup flawless, her jewelry minimal but elegant. Every head in the restaurant turned to stare, whispers rippling through the crowd, but she kept walking until she reached Prince Chidi's table, her spine straight and her smile genuine. Prince Chidi stood up slowly, his eyes wide, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she had made a terrible mistake. But then he smiled, really smiled, and said, "You are absolutely stunning. What made you decide to go bald? It's incredibly bold and beautiful." She told him everything, her voice steady even as her hands shook slightly. They talked and laughed and shared a meal that tasted like hope. And when he drove her home that night, he kissed her forehead and told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and she knew he meant it. Adana was waiting up when Chioma came home, expecting to see her sister in tears, humiliated and defeated. Instead, she saw Chioma glowing with happiness, her bald head held high, her eyes bright with the kind of joy that Adana had never known despite all her wealth and beauty. Prince Chidi had walked her to the door, kissed her hand like she was royalty, and promised to call her in the morning. Adana felt something crack inside her chest, something that had been building pressure for months. It wasn't anger anymore. It was admiration mixed with shame, recognition that her sister possessed something Adana had spent her whole life lacking. True confidence that came from within, that didn't need external validation to exist. For the first time, Adana saw clearly what she had become, saw the ugliness of her jealousy reflected in her sister's grace under fire, and she broke down completely. "I'm sorry," Adana sobbed, falling to her knees in front of Chioma, no longer caring about maintaining her pride or her position. "I'm so sorry for everything I did to you, for the way I treated you, for drugging you and shaving your hair. I was so afraid that you would take everything from me, that Mama and Papa would love you more because they lost you and found you again. I was afraid that I would become invisible, that I would lose my place in this family, and I turned that fear into cruelty. But watching you walk out of this house tonight, bald and beautiful and brave, I realized something. You have something I've never had, something I've been searching for my whole life without knowing it. You have real confidence, the kind that doesn't come from clothes or hair or money. You faced your worst moment and turned it into your greatest strength. Please, please, teach me how to be like that. Teach me how to be strong like you." Chioma stood there for a long moment, looking down at her sister who had tormented her for months, and she felt the anger drain away, replaced by understanding that Adana was not evil, but broken, not cruel, but afraid. She knelt down beside her sister and pulled her into a hug, their bald head and long hair pressed together, two halves of the same soul finally finding their way to each other. "I forgive you," Chioma whispered. "And I will teach you everything Mama Ngozi and Papa Obi taught me about strength. But you have to promise me that you'll be honest from now on, that you'll let me see the real you, not the perfect image you show the world." Over the following months, something miraculous happened in the Nkechi household. The sisters who had been enemies became allies, then friends, then the kind of sisters who finished each other's sentences and defended each other fiercely against the world. Chioma taught Adana about humility and hard work, taking her to volunteer at local orphanages and farms, showing her that real wealth was measured in kindness given and received. Adana taught Chioma about navigating high society and business, helping her build confidence in rooms full of powerful people, sharing the skills their father had taught her about commerce and negotiation. They became a formidable team, complementing each other's strengths and supporting each other's weaknesses. Mama and Papa Nkechi watched their daughter's transformation with tears of joy, finally having both their children home and united in love. Prince Chidi officially proposed to Chioma at a family gathering, presenting her with a ring as beautiful as her spirit, and everyone cheered except Adanna, who was crying too hard to make noise. At the engagement party, Adanna met Chukwudi, a successful businessman who had been watching her from across the room all evening, drawn not to her beauty, but to the way she laughed freely and hugged her sister with genuine affection. The double wedding was the event of the season, with Chioma and Adanna walking down the aisle together in matching traditional attires, their parents weeping with joy on both sides. Chioma's hair had grown back in thick and beautiful, but she still kept it very short, a reminder of the night she learned that beauty was about courage, not appearance. As they danced with their new husbands, the sisters caught each other's eyes across the reception hall and smiled, knowing that they had traveled impossible roads to get here, from war-torn separation to resentful reunion, to this moment of perfect sisterhood. Adanna mouthed, "Thank you," and Chioma mouthed back, "I love you." And in that exchange was the whole story of two souls who had found each other, lost each other, hurt each other, and finally learned to heal each other. They lived on neighboring estates after marriage, their children growing up as close as siblings, their homes always open to each other. Mama and Papa Nkechi lived to be very old, blessed to watch their miracle daughters build lives full of love, service, and sisterhood. And sometimes, late at night, when they were old women sitting on their porches watching their grandchildren play, Chioma would tell Adanna stories about Mama Ngozi and Papa Obi, keeping their memory alive, teaching the next generation that poverty and wealth were both just circumstances, but love and character were legacies that lasted forever.